Okay, so um, the reason why I'm, getting up online and telling you guys a bunch of things is because you need to know these things that I am telling you so that you can have an easier life than I had. Um, there was a German woman that got up online and made a very racist comment, or she basically gave a whole um, lecture about how she ended up with this black man and how it was no competition for her to take this black man out of his community and show him a much better life. And she's this and she's that, and she was brought up in a very good household where they ate dinner at a certain time and had this, that, and the other. Okay, so I will put one of the videos up in my YouTube uh, box, and you guys can watch it and get a reference as to what I'm commenting on now. So here's what I want to say. Here's my reaction and input of that video. Okay. Um, so basically, what she was saying in so many words is that she's better than black women. The same typical shit that has been on their minds, these non-black women, both white and Hispanic and Asian. Not really so much Asian, but in a sense they can act that way. Not all of them, but some of them do. But with white and Hispanic women, I see it a lot because you can just see it on the smirks of their faces when you walk past them in Walmart, which is where you're mostly going to find a lot of these IR couples running around. And you rarely ever see the black man with them. In some cases you do, but most of the time you'll see the biracial child in a position in the cart. They put these children in these carts so that to make sure they're seen, because really they're showing them off, okay, and telling the world, oh, look what I got. I got a different looking, better looking child than what my own community can produce. And so they take these kids out and show them off a lot. So, and I see it all the time. And it's just, it's as a mixed race person myself, it's just, it gets on your nerves after a while because you realize what they're doing. Um, but anyways, this German woman that got up online and put black women down to the lowest of lows, saying that she, in so many words, that she looks better, she can cook better than you, keep house better than you, treat her men better than you. She's not loud, vulgar, violent. She said that in so many words, basically saying pretty much that she's better than you and that she can take your men pretty much at any given time. Okay. And what I want to say is that, she got how she got where she is today because German men made it possible for her to live the type of life that she grew up in. Okay. Where they lived in a typical German family environment where the man went to work for 8 hours out of a day. Okay, then he comes home and they have a cultural, traditional Christian family environment where he comes home, the meals are cooked, the clothes are clean, the house is clean, and, he's treated kind of superior. Okay. Well, I grew up in the same type of environment, um, except the man who raised me is Latino, not really Hispanic, but more or less Latino, because he really wasn't Spanish speaking. But the bloodline definitely was Latino. Okay, they came from Mexico, his family line, and they also had very similar traditions. And when my grandfather married my grandmother, it was the same traditional family values. She got to stay home, keep house, cook and clean and iron, go to church every Sunday, go grocery shopping every Sunday. We got to pick whatever we wanted as kids. We never had to ask really for food at all because it was provided. Never went hungry. And this was a dark-skinned Mexican man that provided us with that type of living. A traditional man whose father came over here from Mexico as an illegal immigrant. And then when he had my grandfather grew up in the same neighborhood as my black grandmother, and that's how they met. And they just got together and ended up married for 50 something years. It might have even been more than that until death did them part. So my grandfather took a great part in raising me because as a young child, my parents, they divorced when I was young. So my mother was working a lot, and she brought home, the paycheck and would pitch in, for the groceries and the bills. But we lived with our grandparents because their house was bigger. But at the same time, when she divorced my dad, shortly prior to the divorce, they had put down a down payment on a house. And after the divorce, the house was put over, I guess, into my mother's name. And then she eventually ended up paying off the house. But for the first several years, we lived with my grandparents, and we lived in a very traditional environment where my grandmother didn't have to work, so she was always home with me and my sister. And it was a very traditional family environment with strong family values. We went to church every Sunday, Sunday school. And, I pretty much told you, we would, she cooked the meals pretty much every day. And every now and then we would have leftovers, but she would usually make it into something. Like if she cooked like a turkey or something like that, then the next day we might have turkey hash or something like that, or turkey tetrazzini, leftovers mixed into something else. And so we never went hungry ever. And my grandfather, coming from the traditional family environment that he grew up in, knew how to fix everything. So we rarely ever had to call anyone over to the house to fix anything because my grandfather pretty much knew how to fix it all. He built homes for a living. He was a construction worker, and so we didn't really need a handyman or anything like that because my grandfather did it all. He had some plumbing, knowledge. He had, construction knowledge. He was very, very, very good with construction, could build it, just about anything. and he brought some home some pretty big paychecks. And there was a couple of times where he even opened up his own construction company. Um, he had his own construction company going for a few years, and so um, there was maybe 4 years out of my life that he might have worked for a company. And then it's traditional for a lot of Mexicans to open up their own shit, which he did. And him and one of his cousins opened up their own construction company, and he just did work like that, his own contractor, as a private contractor. So he didn't really have to go to work and get signed, paychecks and all that type of stuff, because he pretty much had skills. Okay. Never spent a day in college, but it's trained down knowledge uh, that came from his probably father. And I'm not really sure if he went to trading school or not. I'll have to check on that. But the man was a mason. Okay, let's just put it that way. As far as building goes, he could pretty much build anything. And a lot of Mexican men are construction workers, and so it's kind of passed down. That gift is passed down through the family bloodline. Okay, and then when he raised my uncles, his two sons, um, they also grew up with that same knowledge. They could build anything. One of my uncles was also a construction worker. And so he was taught how to build, and also inherited that knowledge from his father. And then he went out to Atlanta when Atlanta was was building itself up in the black population. He went to Atlanta and made a pretty good living out there, uh, his own business. And then his other son did a little bit of construction, but he went into um, pretty much, I think he was I forget now what I haven't, I know what he did, but I can't remember the name, where you work with, not a plumber, but he was, it'll come to me later. And so, anyways, he had a very good job too. He was an electrician. That's what he was. He did it. He worked as an electrician for most of his life. Plus, he did construction on the side for. So he also inherited that knowledge from his father. Okay, handed down, taught, skills. And so we got to grow up in a very good family, traditional, pretty much like this German woman did. And my grandfather really was the best, father figure that I've ever seen. I mean, we didn't have to ask for nothing whenever we went grocery shopping with my grandmother, because my grandfather was mostly working. So she bought like a cart and a half every Sunday of food. Okay, so we could go and just pick anything off the shelves and get it. Just if it was food or pretty much whatever. So we never really had to want for anything. Never went a day hungry or anything like that. And so I always I do have a sense of respect for Mexican men. And when I say that, I'm talking about the traditional men from Mexico. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the mestizos, because my grandfather, I think he was more or less, he was more of a Boricua. He was more on the dark side, more Indian. okay, because he was kind of dark skinned with the lips were a little thicker. Beautiful wavy hair, straight wavy hair, beautiful skin tone, beautiful facial structure, tall, very handsome. And so I he had a little Spanish blood in him, but I don't think it was really enough to be considered a um, half and half. Just more of a Boricua, I think, where they're a little bit more Indian. They have a little bit more Indian blood, but not as much white blood. I think that's what Boricuas are. But anyways, I grew up with those same traditional family values, okay? And one of the reasons why I'm not married today is because I cannot find anyone who can measure up to what my grandfather was in the black community. I just never found it ever. So it just didn't work out for me. Maybe I never really considered, well, I did once, but I never really considered going for a Mexican man because the ones here in the United States are a whole different breed. Okay, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Than the ones back in Mexico. They're a whole different breed. Okay, they think different. They have a whole different consciousness, and it's racist. I'm not saying all the time. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are a whole different ball game. They're not like the Mexicans back in Mexico. They're just not. Okay. And usually they're a little bit darker skinned because my grandfather was a real Mexican, not one of these Mexicans that you see over here in the United States with all this white skin that you're seeing. Those are those I forget. I just forgot. My memory is really going. But those are a mixture between white and black, and I think a lot of them fall more on the white side of Spain than they do the Indian side. I think a lot of the Mexicans today in the U.S., or the Chicanos, whatever you want to call them, they're more like 75% European and then maybe 25% Indian from Mexico. That's what I think. So that's why they look so much whiter, because they keep mixing because of that motto that they have, that, mejorando la raza, mix up, marry up, marry white to better the race. Okay, and so, but this German woman that got online and was pretty much saying that, I got a black man because I'm just simply better than black women. This is the type of attitude that started all this racism, all this, you're black, I'm white, I'm better than you. And what I want to say is that it's German men that gave her the ability to live the type of life that she got to live. So her mother got to stay home and look after the kids and iron the clothes and keep house and cook the meals. She was lucky enough to be able to stay home. Whereas in the black community, you have a race of women that a lot of them get with these black males. And a lot of them do make the mistake of getting pregnant prior to marriage. And then a lot of the times the guys run off. Okay. That's why marriage is really important. And a lot of the times, even with marriage, these guys still do not have family values, because they don't really value black women, because it's a problem with self-hate. They have a deep sense, a lot of them, of self-hate. And so when you realize you can't compete and that you're conquered with these other races, then you start to develop a self-hatred for yourself, and you don't really want to produce anything like yourself. And so you will go and marry what you think is better than you. And then you'll look at the children, the offspring, as being more superior than what you would create if you were to be with your own kind. And this German woman is kind of getting online, putting that into the minds that she's superior. She's putting that into the minds of all of those who listen to her poison and toxic videos, that she's better than you because basically she's white and you're black. Okay? When in actual reality, it's the men in her community that made it possible for her to live the type of life that she got to live. Now, if we were to trade places, me and her, or not, let's not use me as an example because I lived a good life because Mexican men made that possible. Now, if my mother had not moved in with my grandmother, and let's just say she didn't have a down payment on the home that she got prior to that divorce, then I don't know what type of life we would have lived. Okay? It might have been on welfare. I don't know. You know, she might have been struggling. Maybe she might have had to get 2 or 3 different jobs. What if her parents weren't here? See, my mom got a lot of help. Okay, so it's, you know, it's if this German woman were to get pregnant with this black man's child that she's dating right now, and let's just say he were to get a divorce from her, well, now she's got this black, half white mulatto child that she's got to take around with her everywhere. The people and the men in her community are going to see that baby and not want anything to do with her, okay? Because you went and had, you know, as far as they see it, she's a race traitor. And they don't, you know, the men that, the upper class men, like her father, typically don't want anything to do with her. So, you know, then you got the middle class German men. They're not going to want a whole lot to do with her either. And so she's going to be stuck in the black community for the rest of her life, going from man to man to man, probably ending up with 3 to 4 to 5 children on welfare because she's going to have to, you know, every man that gets with these non-black women typically wants a child as a trophy because they don't like to use protection. And so these women usually end up running around with 3 and 4 and 5 kids in the welfare system. They end up in the same situation that black women end up in. And in the meantime, she's getting up on TV, on these talk shows, putting German men down. Not this woman that made the video, but I'm just talking about white women in general. You know, they get up on these talk shows. They talk about white men like a dog, like, well, you're just not attractive. You just don't have it going on. You know, they'll try to compare a black man's body to a white man and a black man's physique to a white man. And, you know, they really, really trash white men. And I think it's very, very disrespectful because if you look at Europe, look at all the cathedrals and the castles and just everything that white men have built over in Europe. look at the way they built it, the designs, and he has put his women up in a very comfortable position. Okay? And if you look over at Africa, outside of South Africa, there are some areas that are very livable, and that's really because those are areas that have been colonized. Okay, I'm just telling you the truth. Okay, but outside those colonized areas, when you go into the rural areas, the villages, there's still no, in a lot of situations, there's still no running water. There's no sewage systems. I can go on and on and on. And this is hundreds of thousands of years later, okay, after white people supposedly left out of Africa, which I seriously don't really even think they're from Africa. I really don't. But that's a different story for a different day. Um, but anyways, white women, I kind of feel like they're very, and I'm not talking about all of them, I'm just talking about the ones that date outside their race and turn around and dog white men online like they've been doing, and comparing them to black men and all that type of shit. You don't see it a lot, but in some cases you do see it on some of these talk shows. They tend to do it a lot. I just think that that's extremely disrespectful, because nowhere in the world have men built the way white men have built up civilization after civilization for their women and children. And then the thanks they get is a slap in the face, pushed aside, talked about like a dog, while their women go to the lowest men on the planet and raise them up as though they were God and worship them as they are gods. Okay? That's what we're dealing with here. And if you say, well, thank you for taking these black men out of the black community, because now I can take your men, like I have told you guys in previous videos, that can't happen, because she's trained her men from thousands of years ago to be race loyal, which basically means racist towards other races. And this has been going on for years. This white woman, somehow, she does it to every single race she comes in contact with. Every colored race she comes in contact with. She's done it to the Hawaiians. She's done it to the Latinos. She's done it to the Hispanics over in Spain. Okay, she's done it with the Italians. She's done it with the Japanese. Everywhere white people go and colonize, she will seduce the men of those colored races. She'll leave her men behind, go and lift them up, create children with them, and then raise those children to be racist towards pure-blooded, monoracial people from their own community. And then she'll raise her pure white sons to keep it race loyal, so that the women don't have the colored women from other communities can't date their own men, because she's meddling in all their affairs, sleeping with all their men, taking all of them, using her white supremacy that white men created and gave her for her. She's using all that white privilege to come into your colored communities, take your men, uh, make them implant their seed into her wombs, and then she raises her mulatto kids to be racist. Then, if when she has children with men from her own race, she raises them to be racist as well, so that these colored women don't have anything to pick from. It's a war tactic. Okay, and she's been doing this since they got here, from the caves or wherever the fuck they're from, Mars, wherever they're from. She's been using these tactics to keep her men race loyal while she goes amongst all these other communities and pretty much has these mixed race children. And then she creates white supremacy by training these colored children that she gives birth to go against their own communities. This is how white supremacy survives. And white men allow her to do it because they're not really putting a stop to it, because it's a war tactic. This is how white supremacy operates. Okay. So the only way to stop this is to leave this white woman alone. Black men are not going to do it, and Hispanic men are not going to do it. So this problem is going to continue until mankind no longer exists, until we end up in some other category, but not the human species. It's going to continue and continue until they either leave this planet or we breed ourselves off into something else, and then whiteness will eventually vanish off. But white men, for whatever reason, are not in a rush to stop her. They're not in a rush to stop her. If you've noticed, they front like they're not down with all this interracial dating, and really they're not. But they front like they don't like their women doing it. But if you've noticed, they don't go to any great lengths to stop her from coming into colored communities, being all up in your spaces, getting all up in your business, seducing your men, mixing her seed with your seed, and then pretty much slowly but surely taking over your community. Okay, by raising her offspring to be racist, and then raising her white offspring to be race loyal, which is basically racist in so many words. Okay, and the more you guys allow this race mixing, the longer this is going to continue, because it is engraved in her. It is engraved in her to do this. It is almost like she's been cloned somewhere, and it was embedded within her DNA to repeat this habitual habit all throughout the world. And nobody wakes up to it. Nobody tries to stop it. People just go along with it. And then you wonder why your communities are the way they are. You wonder why white supremacy survives. Well, you keep mixing with your seed with her seed. And this is why. If you were to break off and stop mixing with her, then there cannot be, then no mulattoes are created. And then if you just ignore them and go off into your own corner and try to start your own shit, and if you're successful, they will then come in and burn that shit down. Okay. So it's really like there's no way out of this shit. The only way out would be to just stop having kids. Don't bring any kids into this, because wherever we are, this planet that we're on is only for them. So why not just opt out, let them have the planet, and we can manifest somewhere else? I'm talking to colored people out there all over the world. If they don't like colored people, then stop having kids. And you know what's going to happen if you stop having kids? They will kidnap your kids and impregnate them so that they can create a third race, because they cannot operate without white supremacy. Their whole structure would crumble. This is how white supremacy survives. It has to keep mixing its seed with your seed. Okay? Because the way they survive on this planet is by having some type of melanin in their body. That's some of the reason why they keep mixing with you, and also to create white supremacy, so that a third race is created, but then that third race turns against you because she is raising the offspring along with her pure-blooded white spring that you are their opponents. And this is how white supremacy keeps surviving, because your kids will then go in and keep mixing with her until all the black is out. Then it has to go back into the black community and recreate the white supremacy structure. And the only way out of this is, like I said, stop having kids, manifest somewhere else, or just don't have any kids, move off into some other part of the planet and prepare for war and fight them off. And that's going to be very hard to do unless you have some type of very high knowledge in nuclear, BOMS making. So it's just everywhere this woman goes, every race she comes into contact with, she creates the racism. Even when she gets with black men, have you noticed how black men will then turn against black women? I'm not sure what she's doing, but whatever she's doing, wherever she goes, she creates racism. Every single mass shooting, the offspring comes from her. Every single one. It's always, and if even if every now and then there might be a Hispanic one or a Latino one, they're white Latinos. It's never the darker skinned ones out committing these mass shootings. They are almost always, not almost, they are always white-skinned or whiter-skinned colored people. Okay, and then her pure-blooded white sons are extremely violent as well. Okay, there's something about this white woman that this is what she creates. And I'm almost beginning to wonder if she is not Satan. Because the kids she raises are hateful. They're violent. They're barbaric. A lot of them are evil. And everywhere she goes, she creates children that then go in to start wars, and they create separation and division, and there just can never be peace. Anything that comes out of her womb is racist in some way or another. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk to you guys about today, and I will get with you in a later video. Thanks so much for listening.